Good morning. Sad news today from the front lines of Iraq. NBC's David Bloom, a husband and father, adventurous spirit, and our colleague, died overnight. We'll remember his life today, Sunday, April 6th, 2003.
And for the first time in 5 days, this force is once again on the move. If I could ask my photographer to pan forward here, you can see.
Welcome to Today. I'm Soledad O'Brien.
And I'm Matt Lauer. Katie Couric joining us from Washington, D.C. this morning to say it's a difficult morning. Doesn't even come close, Katie.
I know, and just seeing those pictures of David sitting next to Soledad and, of course, covering the story in Iraq that he loved to cover so much is just, it leaves you speechless, really.
It is. It's shocking news. We should say that David was not killed in combat. From what we understand, he suffered a pulmonary embolism on Sunday morning, Baghdad time. He was airlifted from the battlefield and died at a military field medical unit this morning.
And of course, Soledad, our thoughts go out right now to David's family, his immediate family and extended family, to you, to everyone at NBC, especially here on Weekend Today, where you and David, of course, had 3 great years at this desk.
Yeah, we did. We sure did.
Katie?
Meanwhile, Matt and Soledad, of course, we all heard this terrible news in the middle of the night. It's still hard to believe, both shocking and heartbreaking. We really have lost a member of the family today. David Bloom, one of the best and brightest at NBC and in TV news, period, died, as Soledad said, early this morning in Iraq. He had been reporting, as most of you know, from the Army's 3rd Infantry Division, giving us thrilling images and first-rate reporting from the front lines of this war. We'll always remember those pictures from the first day David and the 3rd ID crossed into Iraq, broadcasting live as the division first started rolling north toward Baghdad on the truck that we at NBC affectionately dubbed the Bloom-mobile. It was definitely David at his finest, a dramatic, freewheeling, breathtaking moment in history, bringing it to us live as it happened. He gave us quite a few of those moments throughout his 10-year career at NBC. By the way, David would have turned 40 years old next month. And coming up, we're going to talk with some of the people who worked with David and knew him best, including our Washington Bureau Chief, Tim Russert. Soledad and Matt, back to you.
And Katie, as you know, David leaves behind his wife Melanie and also their 3 daughters, twins Nicole and Christine, and the littlest Ava. And our deepest sympathies, of course, go out to them this morning as well. We know that the last couple of weeks had to be very, very tough on them, always worried about David's safety. We also know, and we've received hundreds of emails and phone calls from the military families around the country who told us how grateful they were for David's work. He and the other correspondents in the field gave us a personal look at the war and also the brave men and women who are fighting it. In just a moment, we're going to look back at David's work in Iraq and his career covering the biggest stories of the last decade.
Of course, there is a war going on, so we have to also get you caught up on the news of the day. Coalition forces are in control of the Baghdad airport, and the Marines are advancing to the city from the southeast. Coalition planes are also patrolling the skies over Baghdad, giving troops on the ground 24 hours a day. They're giving them cover. Soledad.
Well, we begin this morning with the death overnight of our colleague David Bloom. He was a dedicated, tenacious, and talented reporter, and much like the people whose stories he covered, he was a leader in his field. He died doing what he loved and doing what he did best. We have more now from NBC's Bob Faw.
And when you talk, you got to yell to me because it's really hard to hear out here.
There was, in everything he did, a sense of urgency. David Bloom knew that it mattered, and he made sure you knew it, too.
Good morning, Matt. This sandstorm has been pounding these troops here in the 315 Infantry.
The war in Iraq showcased all that talent. From those early hours crossing the desert with the 3rd Infantry Division, so many reports filed round the clock. He became what one columnist called Iraq's unofficial travel guide, bringing the war up close and personal.
You asked about food. All we're doing is grabbing these MREs, the meals ready to eat, which frankly are pretty good. My compliments to the military chef.
Spontaneous, unrehearsed, candid, sometimes breathless, always on target. He wasn't just good on his feet, he was dazzling and unfailingly human.
Specialist Santos Cabrera, who's the tank driver of that M1A1 Abrams tank that you see behind me right there, he just found out a couple hours ago that his wife Erica had a baby about 2 weeks or so ago. So I'm going to give this headset to him and let him talk to his wife here.
First and foremost, though, David Bloom was a competitor, dubbed robo-correspondent by one of his producers, who said he'd just keep going and going and never stop. Determined to be first to win, his career was meteoric. This Minnesota native, hired by Miami television station WTVJ in 1989, where he chased down looters after Hurricane Andrew.
Trying to hide your face? Are you embarrassed that you're doing this? Well,
Resourceful, also stretching every deadline he ever met. Bloom was hired by NBC News in 1993, 2 years later moving to Los Angeles to cover the O.J. Simpson trial.
What the defense really wants is a practice run to see how Lopez holds up under cross-examination.
2 short years later, he was named White House correspondent.
David Bloom, NBC News, the White House.
David Bloom didn't just seem tireless, he was. From the devastation September 11th in New York City.
A 40-story building also collapsed. 40 more stories of concrete, steel, and iron crashed into the ground.
To his virtual round-the-clock coverage of the sniper shootings in Washington.
Are you saying it might be this vehicle, or it might be that vehicle, or are you looking for 2 different vehicles?
His goal, other than to spend more time with his wife and 3 daughters, was realized in March 2000 when he began to co-host weekend editions of the Today Show. Though clearly a star, he was impossible not to like.
Katie, Matt, Ann, Al, Dave.
Colleagues, run ragged by his inexhaustible energy, after a 10-minute power nap he could go for hours, were won over by his enthusiasm and his boyish charm.
Oh, what are you doing?
In just a few short years, he made a huge impression. Looking back, one marvels at how much he did and how well.
David Bloom, NBC News, the White House. NBC News, Beijing. Denver. Traveling with the president on Martha's Vineyard. Manchester, New Hampshire.
David Bloom, courageous, committed, compelling, was only 39.
NBC's Tim Russert is Washington Bureau Chief and moderator of Meet the Press, and of course David's old boss here in Washington. Tim, you know David very, very well when he was the White House correspondent for NBC. Tell me your impressions of working with him so closely.
This is David. The war comes home in harsh reality, Katie. You couldn't keep him away from a story. If there was a hurricane, a flood, a coup in Haiti, wherever there was something breaking, he wanted to be there. He begged to be a reporter, to go and be embedded with the military. He was the one who helped design the Bloommobile. He would call me on the phone late at night, early in the morning, saying, I need one more part. We need to get this through. We need approval to put it together.
And he not only contacted the company, arranged the technology, he also made sure they wouldn't create any more of the technology so no one else would have a competitive edge. I mean, he really, reporters don't do that. They don't get involved very often in the technical aspects of this job, but it was really his doing that he was able to broadcast these incredible images from Iraq.
The Bloommobile was one of a kind, and so was David. In high school, he was a championship debater. He had a huge intellectual power and curiosity. Also a great hockey player. I used to go to take him to hockey games here in Washington. He wanted to be on the front row on the ice, and you were sore after watching the game with him because he was animated and wanted to be out there and aggressively watching and reacting. My nickname for him was the Bloomster. And every time I'd see him, I'd say, hey, Bloomster. And he'd say, that's my second favorite nickname. My favorite's Dad. He was devoted to those little girls, the twins who turned 9 last week.
Christine
and Nicole and little Ava, who's 3, and Melanie, his wife. And I know when you were in Saudi Arabia, he called you.
Yeah. He was so cute because he would talk about, he knew so much. I was so impressed by his military knowledge and by his knowledge of Saddam Hussein. He had read multiple books and was regaling me with stories about Saddam. But then he would say, look at my wife and kids. And of course they were beautiful, they're a beautiful family. And he was so proud when he showed me that picture and he said, can you buy some little dresses? Because he knew I'd bought Ellie and Carrie some dresses. And he said, could you buy some for my girls and for Melanie? Because he was so busy. And I said, of course I will. But he just was so in love with his family.
Deeply. In fact, last night, before he had this pulmonary embolism, he was on the phone asking for the scores of the Final Four basketball game, calling his wife. It all just happened so sudden. And he will be 40 May 22nd next month. But that's David. You couldn't keep him away from this story.
Well, how torn was he, though, Tim? Because I know a lot of our viewers were worried about him. They knew that he had these little girls and that he was married. And, of course, you know, it's so upsetting when you hear about a father being taken from his family. Michael Kelly from Atlantic Monthly has 2 little boys, 6 and 3, and he also died the other day in Iraq. Did David talk with you about that, about feeling torn, wanting to do a good job, but not wanting to risk his life in a palpable way?
Oh, sure. But he said, I'm going to be fine. You know, I am ready for this. And you could tell with his enthusiasm, the way he crossed that desert and those memorable pictures forever. He was reporting that story for NBC News, for America, but in his heart were the ladies of his life, Melanie and his 3 daughters. And he constantly wrestled with that, but that's what any good reporter does. It's a hard, hard decision to make. But once again, it comes roaring home, Katie, that war is tough and real. And we have lost one of our very, very best.
You know, we've gotten so many emails wishing him well. You know, because I think viewers have formed a real attachment to David, not only from his tremendous reporting, but from moments when he takes his headset and puts it on a soldier to talk with his wife who just had a baby, or on our show he did that and reunited a young man with his aunt and another with his wife. I mean, that was the kind, he really saw the human side of the story. But some of our viewers wrote, first of all, let me begin by telling you how much I enjoy your work on Weekend Today. I've watched you from the beginning and thoroughly enjoy your wit, charm, and intelligence. You're a joy that I look forward to as I prepare for work on Saturday mornings. I consider it a special treat when I get to see you during the week as well. When I saw that you were riding along with the military and involved on the front lines, I must admit I was very concerned for you. When asked by someone if I knew anyone involved in the war, my first comment is no, but then I proceeded by telling them that I'm very worried about David Bloom. You look like you're holding up reasonably well when I saw you last week, but you sure are in need of a haircut. Please be safe. And to Catherine from Georgia, thank you for doing your job so well. You go above and beyond the call of duty. You risk your life to save others. What could be more selfless than that? This note of appreciation is to let you know that you do not go unnoticed. He was really, really making his mark during this war. I don't want to say he hadn't already, because he had a very impressive career prior to this, but he was really sort of the symbol of journalism in this war.
He really had captivated the country. There's no doubt about it. As he roared across that desert, you could feel the country's heart pounding, so people saluting, people cheering, and all of us at NBC feeling this enormous pride in the Bloomster.
And now we're feeling enormous sadness over his loss.
We'll love him forever. We really will. And the girls, too. They're part of our family forever.
All right. Tim, thanks so much for talking
Katie.
with us. And we'll be back right after this.
Is not combat related, but it is a huge shock and a loss to all of us here at NBC.
As far as being able to get adequate supplies of...
Welcome back. I'm Soledad O'Brien, along with Matt Lauer, and Katie Kirk is in Washington, D.C. this morning. It's nice to have both of you in. It's such a shock. I tell you, I can't get over it. It's just
say it takes your breath away, doesn't even come close. And again, our thoughts and prayers are with David's family, his wife and 3 daughters. Katie, I know you feel the same.
Oh, you know, and I was thinking about it. We knew David quite well and worked with him for a number of years, but I'm sure all the men and women and the troops with the third ID are just as devastated by this shocking loss. And a short time ago, meanwhile, the chairman and CEO of NBC, Bob Wright, issued this statement. He said, on behalf of everyone at NBC, we're greatly saddened by the death of David Bloom, and our hearts go out to his wife, Melanie, and their 3 children. There was no one more devoted to his calling than David, and for that, we are both grateful and humbled. And needless to say, our deepest sympathies to David's family and his crew in Iraq, by the way, photographer Craig White and sound engineer Bob Lapp, who traveled with David all the way through sand and dust and enemy fire right up to the edge of Baghdad today. And I had to laugh almost every time David was on the air. He would say, can my photographer, Craig White, get this shot? And it just shows how selfless and generous he was. He wanted Craig to get a lot of credit for putting himself in harm's way and for capturing all those incredible images that David was able to share with us.
It's true, Katie. I just want to also read real quickly a statement from the president of NBC News. As you know, that's Neil Shapiro. And he wrote, David Bloom was an extraordinary man and dedicated journalist. His courage, passion, and unerring devotion to his craft was unparalleled. At this incredibly difficult time, our thoughts and prayers are with David's family and all of our brave colleagues who remain overseas. And we should say that we're going to talk more with David's colleagues and bring you the latest from the war in Iraq coming up in just a couple of minutes. Soledad.
All right, well, we begin, Matt,